just introduce myself, Jaskarn Gill from BC Human Rights Organization. Our mandate is to promote, protect, and enforce human rights in British Columbia in accordance with the Canadian Human Rights Act, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I got involved with Janna and Elizabeth's advocacy here regarding, well, they were being forced to live in mold and rodent infested properties. I have children, and their children were being forced to live in there as well. And now, from a human rights perspective, I believe that number one, housing should be a basic human right. I think that if we were to try to solve some of the problems across the world, that's one thing we're going to have to probably focus more attention on. And this mold issue, I mean, this is unacceptable. What's happening, especially here in British Columbia, the houses that these families are being forced to live in, this toxic and, well, dangerous living conditions, are being funded by our own government. We're trying to, even now, we're trying to meet with government officials, the Minister of Housing, Ravi Kahlon. He's avoided each of our meetings. We've had multiple requests to meet with him to discuss these matters. And we've also actually made a recommendation that as the Minister of Housing, he should be filing lawsuits to file for damages to those units that were basically, they became deteriorated because the nonprofits who were supposed to maintain them failed to carry out basic yearly maintenance, cleaning gutters and stuff. This kind of negligence should be held accountable, right? But I will let you guys go ahead. I'm basically gonna try to be a listener here and hopefully jump in whenever I can, but I just thought I'd introduce myself. So you guys can all call me Jazz.
Nice to meet you, Jazz. Thank you.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Elizabeth Zbitnoff, and I'm a tenant of Ladner Willows, and that is one of the social housing sites that has kind of become, as for lack of a better reference, many call it the next little mountain. And basically the same thing of being neglected for years. And basically there's only about 10 families of us left, and just stopped maintaining. Probably about, I'm going to say about 2012, 2010, around there, many of the sites just stopped being maintained. And unfortunately, this does go bigger than just the nonprofits. That BC Housing, there were and are contracts in place with the nonprofits, and everything you read, protect the stock, which we all know the housing crisis, we need this right now. And unfortunately, there are thousands of units sitting empty because of wanting to push for redevelopments, and it became more about land value. And I think we became more focused on bumping land value than we really did on housing people. And unfortunately, the ones that are still in these homes are being exposed to not only mold, but lead paint, asbestos, and everything's just been, and the other ones have just been closed up and have just sat for years. So I am not only a tenant, I'm also, the advocate of Ladner Willows, as well as there's 12 in the Red Door Housing Society portfolio in BC Housing. And I'm an advocate for many of the tenants there, because a lot of people are also being pushed out for lack of wanting them to come back with right of first refusal after redevelopments. Because it also became about the government not really wanting to continue with the subsidies and subsidizing, and the nonprofits being self-sufficient. So unfortunately, they have targeted the vulnerable, the people that weren't making as much money, people on disability and things like that, and sort of tried to push them out the door. So we've got some very serious concerns going on. And, like I said, and many people sick, we've lost some people, and we don't doubt that it definitely has to do with the mold. and things like that, because some of the worst units were where these people were living in. So, and we actually, the good thing is we've had mold testing in all of them. So hopefully these families eventually will get some justification and someone held accountable, and that we can get people off the streets and back into homes. So that's where I'm with Janna and Jazz. I'm part of the BC Human Rights Organization, as well as we've sort of, our names kind of changed a little bit. I'll let Janna go into a little bit more on that. I'm going to pass it over to you, Janna.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. I'm Janna Martin. I am with the BC Human Rights Organization and BC Acorn. I was living in mold for 9.5 years. During that time, I watched my health deteriorate to the point where I had a heart attack. I was curled up in a ball on my moldy bathroom floor, wanting to take my life. I've managed to make it through. I'm hopefully in a mold-free home. I had to leave everything in that unit. And in June, I believe June or July, I received notice that they had removed all my belongings without me being there. So they went through all my personal stuff, everything that was sentimental to me, to my children, my medical equipment, our pictures, our certificates, things from my deceased parents that I cannot ever get back. I don't know where they are. I've been denied access to them. I've been denied the keys to wherever storage they are. No one's responded to me to let me know what's going on with them. I've reached out to the Minister of Housing and to the Premier EB more times than I can count, whether it be on social media or Twitter or by email, and they don't respond. They refuse to respond. Jazz and I have gone to their offices to see if we could set up meetings, to advocate on our behalf and on all the tenants and residents that we advocate for, many of whom are afraid to speak out due to fear of retaliation. And we are getting no access to our government officials. It's as if we don't exist in their minds because they don't want to deal with the fact that they let this happen. Thank you for having us here today.
Janna, I'm glad to see that you made it out. How
Yeah,
have
me
you
too.
been feeling since you got out? It's been a long time since I spoke with you.
I'm feeling better. I had a heart attack in that time, and so I still have to go through a bunch of tests. I have to carry my nitroglycerin with me because I still get chest pains a lot. I still have a big battle ahead, health-wise. My youngest daughter has now been diagnosed as a person with disabilities. So she now is a permanent disabled person. And when we moved into the mold 10 years ago, not knowing it had mold, she was healthy. Both my daughters were healthy. My oldest one was an athlete. She could do the grouse grind, which is a huge mountain here that not many people can do. She could do it like it was nothing. And now she can barely get out of bed some days. So they both have really bad medical issues because of it, but we're happy to be out of it. We're still in a red door building, just a different one. And sadly, I've met my neighbors, a couple of them, and the same water damage that happened in my townhouse has happened in other units here, and the same lack of maintenance. What they did for one unit, they just put up cardboard pieces of boxes on the roof, and that's how they fixed it. And unfortunately, many of the people in these buildings are new to Canada, or English is not their first language, or they're disabled. Here we have a lot of elderly people in wheelchairs, and this is what they consider maintenance. And sadly, when I came to this building, I didn't know, because I didn't wander around and look, and I should have. But I feel better in this unit than I ever did in my old one. So I have faith that this one is at least better, hopefully. I do have a question for you, Keely. I know the Minister of Housing reached out to you, and have you heard back from them with any of our questions and concerns?
No, I think that as soon as they realized that I was emailing them on your behalf and they got the questions that I copy and pasted that you guys sent over, they went radio silent.
Which is what we've encountered all along. They don't want to deal with it. We did find out that one of the vice president of the board of directors of Red Door Housing is a federal Liberal politician. So we now know that this goes all the way to the Canadian federal government.
Yeah, Jen and I, we, one of the things with the nonprofits and that, just if I could just jump in there, is when you're in contract with BC Housing and that, and the society, the nonprofit societies, it is one of the obligations that they have the board of directors available in their contact information to the tenants of the building. And for as long as I've lived in Ladner Willows, which is pretty much, I believe we're at 16, 17 years, we've never had that information. And it's always been we'll send it to the head office and we'll deliver it. Just write a letter or put it in an envelope and drop it off or mail it, which apparently the board of directors was in the same office, and which is at Fraserlands, one of the sites. So we're talking, arm's length, there's concerns there. But in finally finding the board of directors and finding out who was on there, someone noticed that Tyler Pronick, I believe his name is, and there was a misspelling on the CRA documents for the societies and that, and the name was transposed by one letter. And as soon as we realized that, in his bio, it did talk about how he is board of directors with the Liberal Party and with the federal government. And so here we are going, we're not getting anywhere. We're being blocked at every avenue to the degree of myself being targeted. When I started this about 5 years ago and advocating for tenants and myself in Ladner Willows, and I remember being told by the bylaw compliance with the city, who had ignored it as well. And we're talking units actually falling down through the roof to the third floor because the door, they'd have a flood and the door was just closed and the tenants moved to another unit. And they said, your file, something's very fishy here, has gone all the way to the federal government. Now, why would Ladner Willows in Delta, BC, this little 40 unit site, go all the way to the federal government? And not once, but twice told me this. And I said, I don't know, but I said, it seems to be that we're the ones that are being targeted, and these are our homes. These are, our children have grown up here. And so then I, into looking out and looking into it, realized it was happening at mutual sites, sister sites, and then started to broaden and look at the other societies. And so basically I started working with an investigative reporter who actually just did another story after about 4 years. So we had put 3 or 4 out, and one was CTV. And I found that suddenly when a lawyer had said for me to send him everything, I had people breaking into my home daily, like I was being somehow tortured to some degree. There's lots of things that went on, and basically advised by I am a US citizen, but because I have my son is Canadian, I was married to a Canadian from Tsawwassen there. I was advised for my own safety to come back home to the US, and unfortunately has continued on at the moment I got here. That the same with the breaking into where I'm staying and everything, and the continued hacking of all the devices, the controlling of the phones to the degree of
So are you
deleting
telling me
911 calls.
they're breaking into your rental when you're not there?
Yes, they were. Even when I was there, and I would actually just go up to the washroom, I'd come down and find that my home had been breached. And my neighbor, thank goodness, witnessed it all. There was like a clicking sound, and watch everything be jammed all around my entire unit. Suddenly, I no longer had control of any of my devices. And this is, again, the same situation that soon the day that I came to the US, I've had 2 new phones here so far, all new devices, and it's exactly the same thing. People aren't able to get a hold of me. My own son, who I've been stuck in the US now for a couple of years, for safety concerns. And I've literally not seen my son, who is now 21, but still my only child. And it continues, you know, phone calls. Like I said, people can't get a hold of me. I'll go to make a call and it's immediately shut off, call ended, and I'm never actually talking to who I think I'm talking to, I've now found out. 911 calls, I remember talking to a gentleman, and suddenly, you know, after a couple of minutes and talking to him about what's going on, I've got a woman answering, or suddenly going, 911, how can I help you? 4 911 calls deleted from my phone. So this has been something that is quite concerning, and it's all because of, you know, my only tie to the US
Okay,
is my
Elizabeth,
family.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just
Hmm.
want to make sure that I'm understanding this
Yes,
clearly, because you're describing a situation where you feel like the government is actually like affecting your devices and your ability to communicate on them. Is this what you're saying?
it is exactly what I'm saying, and it's definitely many in our group. And it's the same scenario and the exact same thing that went on. And I mean, literally going through my
This is
attic
the kind of stuff
daily.
that they'll do to you, and then like you just
Hmm.
sound crazy trying to describe it so no one would ever believe
Yes,
you.
yes. And that is what unfortunately has gone on. There is a very unfortunate degree with the police of then trying to say a mental health issue and not dealing with it, and very obvious and many witnesses to all of it. Go ahead, Jazz.
I'd just like to add here, sorry, some of the stuff that Elizabeth and Janna have said, and I've been making notes here as well. But I mean, since we're speaking on the type of persecution that citizens are being basically subjected to, yes, this is the tip of the iceberg, because I know from Janna and Elizabeth through their network that more than two victims have passed away because of this. So there's people who have died uh, for this reason. We've said this to many government officials, we've said this to human rights lawyers, and they seem to agree with us that by definition, this is a genocide. When you force people into a system where knowingly it's going to cause damage to their health or mental health, it's defined as a part of a genocide. um, the police, Janna and Elizabeth have went to the police, and they have done absolutely nothing except for cover up. Like, these are very, very, very serious allegations. The mainstream media in British Columbia has refused to bring out their story. CBC, which is owned by Public, they canceled the story on them, I think the night before it was supposed to be aired. Like, we've got victims who are basically being sent through this system where they can enter this public housing system, perfectly healthy people, and by the time these people are done with them, they are disabled. Actually, some of them are disabled or marginalized people. So I mean, we're looking at major discriminatory basis here. But at the end of the day, they are causing damage to these people's health and mental health. And the people who should be accountable is the government. And the government is actually, it seems, by all intents and purposes, they are complicit. But I'll let you guys get back
We do
there.
have similar issues here in the States, so I don't, just because I hope that I didn't give you the impression that I was judging her as crazy just because I
Oh,
said they're doing
no, no,
things to make you
oh, no.
sound. Okay.
Oh, no.
I
Because I
knew,
am taking you
yeah,
guys
no,
seriously. I
Keely,
just
I
want
knew
you to
you
know.
were clarifying. I knew you were clarifying. I actually have, because I'm in Washington State, I have a girlfriend that's involved in exactly what you're talking about. And the same thing with the housing and that, and the concerns. And she has been really great and actually has posted a lot of stuff on Facebook and commending me on continuing to do the same thing. We went to school together. And it's one of those things that it is so concerning, all of it. And of course, for me personally, I really have separated it a lot. It's almost like I feel like I'm not a tenant anymore because I've advocated and brought this out into the public, because I know there will be no change until we continue to bring this forward. And, you know, the one thing that Janna and I, had we not had each other and had we not pushed through, we maybe, you know, I don't know if we would have stopped. But I know that, and then in meeting Jazz, and we were informed that our first meeting with Jazz was surveillanced by none other than, no longer with us, but Atira's CEO. And so, or should I say former CEO. And we saw email and our names were listed and everything else. And so this definitely goes high. And we've now realized that. And like I said, but it is very concerning also to see it continue on now that I'm in the United States on American soil. It's bad enough that it was happening to an American in BC, permanent resident, but to see it then continue on is, you know, and all for trying to keep our families and other people in their homes and keep them safe and do something that, and push for something that should be happening anyways. We have people dying every day in the streets because they're not in homes. And it's something that, you know, and then when we do get them in homes, or, you know, we're letting the stock go and we can't, you know, and they're just sitting empty because they want to redevelop them. So it's like a vicious circle. And they're continuing. What drives me nuts is the public thinking that we have to build, build, build. We do not have a housing crisis so much as we have an affordability crisis. And, but when we talk about it, so the affordable ones are then now sitting empty because the government has another plan. And like I said, when we start talking about it, and it's more about not wanting to fund, you know, subsidize the subsidies and that, and we don't want, you know, we want to target the, and I heard this is an issue in all of the Western, the Pacific Northwest and that, and having, looking at more a land value is our concern rather than the actual homes, you know. We're now talking that, yeah, this is concerning. But I did know, Keely, that what you were saying and clarifying, and thank you for clarifying, because I think it is important. I told Janna originally I wasn't going to talk about it, but I think that people need to know just how, you know, how much when you're going, you know, trying to talk to, you know, government officials, and then you realize that just, you know, how deep this goes, and they start to actually target residents and
Well, it's a really great strategy to discredit you psychologically. Because
yes.
you start telling people my phone's tapped and I can't make phone calls and I've been targeted because I'm doing this. Almost nobody would believe that. So that, I mean, they don't really have to physically harm you. They can just destroy your reputation, I guess.
Which is what they were attempting to do. And because I was the one to bring it out and push it, and, you know, everyone was calling me the Aaron Brockovich of BC, like of housing in BC. And basically it just, you know, we continued, thank goodness, to push back especially when we found each other and had that support, and we really grew, and we just, you know, amalgamated with all the different sites and just found out that it was happening everywhere. And so it was something that, I am a very strong woman, and I had to be, and I wasn't going to, and still won't stop. And it was the same with Janna, and having that, you know, we all just decided, no, this is too important. But it is very disturbing that has exactly been the attempt to defame my character as I've become more well-known in BC.
Janna, have you had anything like that happen to you?
Absolutely. My daughters and I were at the movies and I was watching our camera on my phone, and they had scrambled my camera, and we had rigged up the attic to our house just to see if anybody was going to come through. Just, I had a feeling. And when we got home after the movie, you could see arm prints in the bags that we had up there. from when they came through the attic. And when my daughter was in surgery, only one person other than my immediate family knew that she was in surgery. And while she was literally in surgery, I get a call from the alarm company, because I went out and got a professional alarm company after that, that someone had tried to break into my house during the day while she was at surgery. And only one person other than my family knew the date that she was going to be in surgery. And he was from Red Door Housing Society. I've had cowbells ring in the old complex when I would leave, which turns out they did that at Ladner Willows as well. Even now, I have a van that's parked outside my apartment building. It's there all the time. It has strange equipment in it. I walk by and I'll be on the phone and I'll walk right by the van and the call will drop instantly. And I have no doubts in my mind that I am being surveillanced as well. I've been out with friends and strange people have come and taken my pictures. People I don't know. I was at an Acorn rally in Surrey. A young man came and took my picture, just my picture. You know, I've had a couple. I was sitting in the local Wendy's about 2 years back with a friend of mine, and it was blatant that this couple was standing there taking my picture. And my friend, she's like, "How do you deal with that?" And I said, "Well, I'm used to it. That's what happens when you speak out and you stand up for yourself. And that's what happens when you launch a human rights case," which I've had to do, which is still ongoing. Despite everything that's going on, they still do it. And now we know the level of involvement from the government. It's not just a local thing or a provincial thing. Now it's federal. And we know this now. We actually have it documented. We have documented proof that the federal government, the Canadian federal government, is involved. And that's why no politicians will work with us. They won't answer our emails. As you know now, they don't answer yours either. They've completely washed their hands of it because they know that they're all involved. And how much bigger this is, because like Jazz and Elizabeth said, we've had people die. I personally know of people who have died after living in mice and mold. So does Elizabeth. And it's cruel because that could have been us too. And to watch my health decline and my children's health decline, and to watch Elizabeth's health decline in the 3.5 years that I've known her, you know, and they're stripping us of our lives and of our dignity and of our self-esteem. And no matter what, though, we still, even if we don't want to, we keep going on and we keep bringing people together, because it's not just us. Now we know that we've spoken to other tenants in other buildings in Red Door and outside of Red Door who are also living in mice and mold and stuff like that. And it's cruel. You know, they get the funding from the taxpayers to do the maintenance on these buildings, and everybody pays their rent, and that's what we do. And yet we're still targeted and the maintenance doesn't get done. And then they have new Canadians, newcomers who don't know any better and don't know their rights and are afraid to speak out because they don't want to end up on the streets. And they're allowed to live with cardboard boxes to cover up the leak in their apartment. And it's cruel because this is their health and their mental health being affected, because you can't bring friends over and have family over when your home looks like that. It's embarrassing. And they're doing it on purpose, because if they let these buildings get neglected, then they can condemn them, knock them down, throw everybody out on the streets, rebuild, and jack the rents for quadruple the price. And now
Is that part of the
agenda.
aim, to kind of let this housing just get run down so that they can
Yes,
make a case?
in fact,
Yes.
if I could jump in, Janna, sorry, just to give you an example, like 2 of the sites, Ledner Willows and another one called Placed as a Me, and I'm not saying that correctly, but basically we call it PDA, and Coquitlam, and you know, the 2 unit or both sites started to undergo a roofing project, and they got about, I would say, a quarter of the way through both projects in knowing, finding and meeting the people in there. And sister site, they stopped them, the projects, to never ever start them again. And it would just happen that through meeting and finding a couple of the gals that were in the news who were scared to death to talk to me and were sure that I was tied to BC Housing or red door, and everyone, it's very hard for people to come forward and step forward, because then they are threatened with eviction. In fact, I will say right now that they are trying to evict me for, I've now been given an eviction notice for a lack of repairs and maintenance, and what they deem as cleanliness. And it was basically it's there's a case that unfortunately I cannot discuss, but it was basically, it came out in the media. So I'll let you do your own due diligence on that. And as within basically, I don't know, probably a week or so, I was given an eviction notice, and they said I was in breach of a material term, which with the RTB, and unfortunately, a lot of people don't know the Residential Tenancy Act and the Residential Tenancy Board and how to navigate it. And that's one of the things that I've really tried to help people with as well, and gone on as an advocate with cases and that, and won quite a few actually, and have learned pretty much backwards and forwards. And if you're going to breach a material term, what that means is it's a term in your agreement that both the landlord and the tenant are this is so important to them that you can't break it, and then they could evict me. But as we know, as all 12 sites of this portfolio, and this is also BC Housing, they have in place what is called an on-site review. And it's used to be every 1 to 3 years. It's still every 3 to 5 years now. And basically this should have never happened. And we're talking units in my building that the roof is falling through. There's 40 units. There's only 10 families left because they've just had floods and that, and the doors closed. And all of them. So to come after me, and I knew what basically we're trying to contravene the Residential Tenancy Act to get what we want, get rid of me. The defamation of character, get her out of the site, get her out of the country. And also it's trying to contravene with the Supreme Court and trying to get it thrown back out, a case down to the Residential Tenancy Act. And that's basically why, but it's kind of comical. I hate to laugh, but it was basically trying to, to go after me to say that there's even part of it that said I didn't repair something. I have no idea what they're talking about. Obviously there isn't anything that I would be responsible for repairing. So it's, but it's sad too. Like I said, it's been a constant target on myself and Janna. So, but many others as well, anyone involved, everybody's phones they're going through the same thing. So it's quite concerning. But yes, it has been a purposeful neglect to redevelop them. Sorry, Jazz, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, I just wanted to, regarding the condition of these buildings and how we're saying that they're intentionally basically running these buildings down to the point where they're going to be knocked down. We have video that we could send you guys from Ladner Willows. Myself and Elizabeth walked through the units or part of the area, and that's where half those units are empty. And it's just disgusting to hear that and to know that there's half those units in Ladner Willows are empty when we have actually homeless families in British Columbia. And because Elizabeth being from America, I wanted to get this in because I think I've got 10% battery left, and I'm my bad there, but because Elizabeth is from America and this is in Canada and you guys are in America as well, I'm wondering if there's some kind of, if any of you guys can maybe look into under, United States, Canada, and Mexico agreement, USMCA, chapter 27. It's to do with corruption and money laundering. And I think that it explains the role of our government officials, and the way they're acting is actually contrary to USMCA chapter 27. A lot of people don't know about this section because it just came into effect on July 1st, 2020. I only know about it myself is because prior to this human rights advocacy, I was injured at work. I had a lumbar back injury, and what we found was there's an investigation now pending through the FBI, and it's under USMCA Chapter 27 regarding workers' compensation fraud. That we found common ground because the money that was basically being sent from workers' compensation boards was sent through a company and then through New York, which makes it a federal, or sorry, USMCA breach. I'm wondering if under the same legislation, we might be able to kind of collaborate from America and from Canada and try to approach some of our maybe the US consulate or the US embassy and see if somebody can start an investigation, because like I said, Elizabeth being in that position she was, being a permanent resident of Canada and was basically bullied and harassed out of this country into another country, into her home country. I mean, there's international issues here. And the fact that she was forced to live inside these toxic and uh, dangerous environments, and then also her life threatened, I think somewhere along, and then she also reached out to the government and they didn't help. So I'm wondering if there's an opening there or something, an opportunity we could maybe explore there.
And just to touch back on that, when Janna had said about the attics, they were coming through my attics every day. Thank goodness my neighbor witnessed it all. You could hear them coming through like it was like a herd of animals, and they just didn't even care. And it was like, and suddenly it'd be opened up on I had blocked it all off, but because the attics opened up, it would be opened up on the opposite side. And we noticed when we looked up, and because the units were all empty in the row that I was in. And so, we noticed that there were partitions put up. And, we have an email from a gentleman that came from BC Housing, even though he didn't admit that, and I think he's still with BC Housing. And he came onto the Red Door staff, and he jumped into an email because I said, was there any ongoing work that was in the attics that maybe we weren't told about? Because it was crazy. I actually wasn't there when my neighbor witnessed it. I was outside, and she goes, do you know, for the last 20 minutes, it sounds like someone's moving furniture in your attic? And I was like, perfect. I'm glad you've witnessed it now. And this was, basically there were partitions put up about 4 to 5 feet on each side from the outer wall to this partition on each end of the units. And there was also an oval sort of door cut into it in a corner, in the right hand corner. So it was very small that you would have to crawl through. And basically I sent an email asking about this, and we'd gone up there and saw this, and the police saw it and refused to go into the attic to check after I ended up kind of basically catching someone and cornering them in that unit. And I knew that they were hiding in there, and the police would not go in. Oh no, we can't do it. Even though they went and looked at, no, we're going to write down in the report we looked in the attic, but never would go in to look behind the partitions. And anyways, the email back said, oh yes, the partitions were put up to keep tenants out of each other's units because they're all connected. But the partitions were facing the outer walls, not the connecting walls. And there was a little oval door cut in. So again, it's, it is just something that, is so concerning. And I think that Jazz is definitely onto that. But also, if you want to talk about with proving with the purposeful neglect and that it wasn't just us and the tenants. Ladner Willows went to a public hearing, and it is on record, and anyone can see it if you go to the document center for Delta, City of Delta. And if you pull up the public hearing for Ladner Willows, the community came together and literally had secretly put together a 200 signature petition against the redevelopment because of the treatment of the tenants, the pushing everyone out, the lack of maintenance, purposeful neglect. Many people got up and spoke at the public hearing, and it finally came forward. And it is concerning that our Minister of Housing now, Mr. Ravi Kahlon, MLA Ravi Kahlon, was the one, he's the MLA of North Delta, Ladner Willows is in Ian Payton, South Delta, MLA. But Ravi put together the funding for Ladner Willows redevelopment and put together a group to push that through, and literally showed up at the first and second reading, which then takes it to a public hearing, which is quite concerning because it was a sway in, it could have been looked at as a sway in the vote when you've got an MLA coming into a meeting and it has to do with the site that he's secured the funding for. So that has now been put on hold because that 6 years of this redevelopment and plan, because of what I did put out and people seeing it and people in the community that lived right there. And thank goodness they came forward, and it ended up getting thrown out. They didn't have a choice. The whole redevelopment got thrown out, but they're still trying to push us out. And still, we had one meeting and we were supposed to meet with BC Housing and the city of Delta after that. And that was over a year ago. We were supposed to meet in about 2 weeks and it's never happened. And now they're continuing to try to push us out. So, and it was in the public hearing at the end that there was a lot of mending that they needed to do with the community and the tenants and everything. And again, we're right back where we started. So if that sort of, people can, my apologies. For the roosters there, somebody can go, and definitely anybody can go and look, and Twitter hashtag Ladner Willows, and it's basically the one site that's been the example of everything that's going on, and unfortunately all over BC, and we're finding out even further in other provinces as well. So if that kind of helps with the unfortunate, of what's kind of gone on and continued to, but I do think that Jazz is onto something. Then once I did contact the US consulate and in Vancouver there and the embassy, I was told that because I was back on US soil, there was nothing they could do to help me. And so I've just been, and I've contacted the senator here. I've spoken to them. Anyone I talk to, will get back to you, and then I don't hear from them again. And I don't know why that is. I don't know, but it's just been at both sides of the border now. And it is quite concerning. But I think with this side, it's more of a situation of people aren't able to get through to me.
I think that what you guys are experiencing is deliberate corruption.
Mm.
And it's like it's hard to comprehend that like your government would do something that's not in your best interest because they're supposed to be there to help us, but they're not, and they're working against you, and they're doing it for profit. And we have a lot of the same issues here in the States with renters. Like there are no, I wish that this was an issue that was just in Canada, I guess is what, not that I wish you guys were the only country dealing with it and every country wasn't, but it's, I guess what I'm trying to say is this corruption isn't isolated to Canada, and all of the governments seem to be in on it. So like where do we go from here? Because our United States government, like for example, Eric is on the call. He's the original prototype of chronic fatigue syndrome, which is a CDC research instrument that was later connected to mold in buildings. There's a government official, Elizabeth Unger. She's the head researcher of CFS. Eric has talked to her about mold face to face, and she said to his face, it's just too big for us to deal with. So she's like the head of this research agency to research something with toxic mold, who has no intention of actually making that connection because she's blocked by like whoever yes. Government is protecting with their special interests or government interests. Like this is not isolated corruption to what you guys are experiencing, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
No, you're right. And, the one good thing for us is I've done so much research from day one and the documents and things, and found so many documents and agreements, like bilateral agreements with the federal government and each province where they are to report on every site. And so there are things in place too that they knew what was happening. They've continued to allow it to happen. And, we had national housing strategy and the federal level, the auditor general came forward and said, you're not building affordable housing. There are people dying in the street, and it's actually in the report. So things are at least, the one thing that we've done is continue to bring it to the public, because we know, and I'm on Twitter, and I started with about 11 followers a couple years back. I'm over 600 now. Many are reporters, many are people, I was actually being followed by our now premier, but at the time I didn't realize this, but it was assistant attorney general and minister of housing. We all know our premier was previously the minister of housing and attorney general, the only two government entities, the ministries that BC Housing is accountable to. So our premier was responsible for all of these files and BC Housing in both areas. BC Housing is accountable to the AG and the Minister of Housing. And so, it does go to show that there's definitely concern there. Janna has spoken with him at an Acorn rally before he was the premier, and he asked us to send the concerns. We did. Again, no response. And this was how long ago? Right before I came here, so a couple years ago now. And we continue to find the roadblocks at every corner. And that's why we're continuing to put it out and meet with people like you. And we were on the radio station and different things. And we're going to continue to do it. We're not going to stop, because people are seeing it and people are coming forward, which is really good. And now that we have it out there is some serious corruption and a bit of scandal with BC Housing and Atira. I don't know if you guys have seen any of that, but it was the CEO for 30 years. And him and his wife, who ran a nonprofit SRO and a for-profit and she was also on the board of directors for the federal level, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing. And so basically that's just come forward. So it may really help with things, because much of the public says, well, what does that mean for the rest of the nonprofits if they were doing it with this one? So it's kind of, and we're going to continue to hold them to account.
Well,
So
I definitely have a lot of appreciation for your consistency. Janna, I still get those emails, and you are so relentless with sending those emails. It's like,
Thank you.
no, I'm serious. For as sick as you've been and for all that you've been through, your will to keep going and fighting through this is like, I don't know where you get that fire. Actually, I do.
well, I'm her advocate, so if that
I get
tells
it
you
from my
anything.
daughters, because
Yeah.
my oldest daughter told me that if I let them do what they wanted to do, it'd be like pouring poison down Rain's throat. And that stuck with me forever. And I wasn't going to let them do that. I wasn't going to let them pour poison down her throat. And if I have to fight till my last breath, I will fight till my last breath, because my kids and your kids and Elizabeth's son and Jazz's daughters and all the kids out there and all the families and people that are going through this, they're worth it. They're worth everything I've been
They
through.
are.
The whole world needs to know what's going on, and mold needs to be exposed, and people need to learn about how deadly it really is. And if it wasn't for exposing mold and Elizabeth and Jazz, I have no idea where I would be. I really, really don't. I would probably not be on this planet anymore.
Well, no,
I'm
'cause
grateful for all of
you've
you.
been fighting independently of really anything that we've done for you. This is only our second interview with you, and you've been fighting relentlessly through sickness and stress and chaos. And I know that it hasn't been easy, and I think a lot of people have and would have given up. So
I think if we didn't have each other, and exactly, when I met her, she was very broken, and I was strong at that time. And I think there was a reason. I think there's a reason for everything. And I think that definitely we were supposed to meet. And, we've written emails for years. I've written them all the way, and they've gone all the way to Trudeau. I've never been shy about who I'm including, and I guess I've sort of rubbed off a little bit there with Janna, and I am still her advocate, and I am involved in her human rights case, and will continue to fight for her and everyone else. And like I said to Janna, this is our legacy. And no matter what happens, we can always stand proud and know that we did everything we could for our own families and everything for the other people out there. And it is making a difference. I don't care if it's one family that we're saving, but it's definitely more and more people have contacted us and are coming forward and are not so scared to stand up and talk. And we will continue to push for legislation to change and people to know their rights and, for the safety, of course, of the housing. And we need it, fix it, finish it, but basically for people to also navigate the residential tenancy branch and things like that, to know that, they don't have to, it's horrible. They want to target people like me and then say I have mental health. I'm disabled as well. I'd lost use to my legs years ago. I have the use back now, but I had emergency brain surgery, and so I am also someone that, so seeing the systemic targeting that's gone on, and facing all of this, but the inner strength that we have, and this is why I'm so strong. I overcame a lot, and I think that it's something that I know Janna and we won't stop. And we really appreciate you guys for standing beside us, and thank you for informing us that the Minister of Housing has not responded, because we will continue to push on with that as well. To ask you to send questions, or basically, you know what I mean, and then not respond. The fact that he actually went past BC Housing to contact you directly kind of says a lot of it, because BC Housing is the province. They are behind every one of the retrofits, every one of the projects that goes on. They are not only involved firsthand, they are the ones that make all of the calls. So basically with Janna's stuff, with everything with the Fraserland group, anything that goes on, and I know this because I did it firsthand at Ladner Willows, there were many of them that were mold remediated because somebody went to the city and forced a investigation and pushed for that. And it just so happens that I worked with that gentleman all the way through for a 1.5-year project, and BC Housing was there every day. And for the meetings, the walkthroughs, everything, and continued to try to band-aid, shortcut, leave people in mold, and I wouldn't let them. And neither would he. So, I do know that they're the ones that are funding it. They're the ones that are sending in to have testing done before the projects, but only testing a few. And then, like the case of Fraserlands, to go in and start and do this retrofit, and then say we're going to go back in and then do the mold remediations after. I think we all know that doesn't make any sense. You're exposing those tenants every time you open up anything, drill holes, and then to say you're going to go, you're painting and fixing everything, and then you're going to go open it up again. They're not. They're band-aiding it. They have no intentions of preserving the stock, and certainly no intentions of the safety for the tenants that are living there. And while this is going on, we all know, and they know. So again, thank you for having us, and
Thank you guys for all coming on and for updating us on where you're at. So it was nice to chat with you again, Janna, and to meet you, Elizabeth.
You too, Keely. Thank you. And thank you, Eric.
Thank you both.
Okay, we'll talk to you later, okay, guys?
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye. Thank
Bye.